Hey folks, how's it going? I hope you're all doing wonderfully. Please do subscribe if you like the channel. This is actually my third take on this video. I am getting kind of sick of talking about this situation now. It's a bit darker than the kind of thing I'd normally cover anyway, so having to talk about it 3 times is getting on my nerves a little bit, but it has to be done. It's just such an unbelievable situation on so many levels. I'm not one for trigger warnings, but please do be advised that this video will be discussing a person who has committed an exceptionally grave crime against a child, and I'll have to obviously mention that during this video. I wouldn't normally cover these kinds of things because there's enough darkness in the world, and I do like to keep the depths of depravity off this channel, at least the darkest depths of depravity anyway. Try and keep it off the channel as best I can, and try and keep it out of my life and consciousness as best as I can. Obviously I know with some of the topics I covered it can get a bit dark, but not this dark. But what really blows my mind about this case is that there was basically no consequences for this guy. Now that might be about to change, by pure fluke really. So if you take a good long look at the guy on the screen, his name is Callum Haycock of Kidderminster, England. He's been found guilty of the crime of rape, and his victim was a 5-year-old girl. Now, he was found guilty after a trial, so he actually pleaded not guilty, but the evidence was sufficient that he was found guilty because he did do the thing that he was accused of. As a result, the victim obviously had to testify in court against him because he pled not guilty, so he put the victim through that as well. Now, one would normally expect this kind of crime to attract a long custodial sentence, especially when the person is found guilty after a trial. What kind of sentence do you think this guy got for raping a 5-year-old child? If you're thinking that I'm doing this video because he got some kind of super lenient prison term, such as a year or something like that, then you'd be wrong, because this guy did not get any prison time at all. The judge gave this guy a 3-year community order and a £200 fine. That's it, that's the punishment section of his sentence. A 3-year community order and a £200 fine. And he had to pay the victim £2,500 in compensation, as if that's going to compensate for that kind of crime. Not only was he not given any jail time, he was put on the sex offenders register for 5 years. So after 5 years, this guy's name's going to come off the sex offenders register for some reason. Why would he not be on the register for life? What possible justification could there be for him coming off the sex offenders register at any point? It's absolutely mental. This is clearly a miscarriage of justice, so certainly that's what it looks like anyway. I know the UK is incredibly soft when it comes to prison sentences for serious crimes, and I think pretty much everyone agrees. I don't know anyone that thinks the UK is too harsh with its prison sentences. You only need to look at Mairead Philpott, who the other day walked out of prison after serving 8 years for the manslaughter of 6 children. So 6 children are dead because of her, and it was a deliberate house fire that caused their deaths, and she's got out of prison after 8 years. The story of Mairead Philpott is basically that she and her husband concocted a plan, some kind of scheme to frame someone else. She allowed the husband to pour petrol around the house and set it on fire, while she called the emergency services to make it look realistic and effectively dob someone else in for it. This was obviously a very tragic case because the 6 children in the house actually died as a result of this fire being set, and Mairead Philpott and her husband Mick Philpott were sent to prison. Mick got a minimum of 15 years, which is nothing, and Mairead got 17 years, but it wasn't a minimum, so she got 17 years and is allowed to walk out after half, so she's out after 8 years. I was going to do a video on that and some other criminally short sentences that I've been made aware of recently that have come up in recent years, but I decided not to do that video. My point is that I'm very used to being dismayed by the state of sentencing in the UK, but regarding this guy, Callum Haycock, I've never heard anything of the sort. Being found guilty of rape in any case, somebody not going to prison after being found guilty of any rape, I've not heard of before. I'm sure it does happen, but I've not heard of it. And let alone when the victim is so young. It really is inexplicable to not receive any prison time. It's not a stretch of the imagination to imagine that this guy's got connections to the judiciary. And that's certainly a conspiracy theory that's going around at the moment, that this guy is somehow connected to people, and that's why he's got such a low sentence, if you can even call it a sentence, especially when you consider that rape is a crime which can carry a life sentence. The judge is free to give a life sentence, but this guy walks free from court after being found guilty. Obviously, there's no evidence that corruption is involved, but there's got to be something going on. There's got to be something else going on that the public isn't privy to. And I'm not the only one who thinks that. You might have heard of the secret barrister. He's on Twitter. He's very good. He usually breaks down sentences and explains the reasoning of judges and things like that. He's an expert in the law, basically. Comes across very well. Even he says there's no information on why this sentence is what it is. And he also says that it's very, very unusual. There is some word online that the guy may have special needs, which is the understatement of the century, and that those needs are so special that they have mitigated his actions in this case, basically meaning that he's almost not culpable. Now, I don't have a clue if that is true, that he has special needs, but it may explain why in the photograph he is kissing a toy van, but it still doesn't make any sense. That may well not explain why he's kissing the toy van. He may be doing that for whatever reason, but it still doesn't make any sense that just because he's got special needs that they were a mitigating factor for such a serious crime. Surely if he's so severely mentally ill that he is not quite responsible for the crime, he wouldn't have been convicted of the crime anyway, or he would have been at least put into a hospital, a secure hospital for treatment, surely. I don't know how these things work, but he's been sentenced for rape, he's been found guilty for rape, so his special needs cannot be that much of a mitigating factor. Unless he was so ill that he didn't know what he was doing was wrong, or cannot stop himself committing these kinds of crimes, in which case he's clearly an ever-present danger to children, and again, he should be locked in a secure hospital until he's cured. And I don't believe this kind of person would be cured if that's a symptom of their illness. And again, why will his name be taken off the sex offenders register in 5 years? Is he suddenly going to just become not a danger after 5 years? So after 5 years he can just go and apply for jobs, babysitting, or as a janitor in schools and things like that, can he? It just doesn't make any sense. Now, there's nothing online, not that I can find anyway, that tells us who the judge in the case is, but my instinct is that the sentencing history of this judge needs to be scrutinised, and I would like if some journalists would actually do that. I find it quite surprising that they haven't done it. Obviously, my opinion is that this judge needs to be struck off because it's a travesty of justice, but that's just my own personal feeling on the matter. There might be some factors, potentially, that explain why the judge has given this kind of sentence. I can't think of anything that would allow for this person not to at least have some time in custody. And you've got to remember that prison isn't just for punishment. Prison's designed to keep society safe from evildoers as well. You cage people so that they cannot harm society. That's part of what prison is. And this person is clearly an extremely dangerous individual. They need to be locked away, whether that's in prison or in hospital. They shouldn't be walking around in society with the same mind and the same impulses as they had when they committed the crime, with no restrictions on them. I don't believe there's any restrictions on this guy. He's got a community order, but he doesn't have any, as far as I'm aware, any restrictions placed on him. Not that have been reported anyway. It does potentially raise quite an interesting ethical argument about how a society should treat people who commit crimes who are so mentally ill that they don't know what they're doing. But in my opinion, it's the victim's rights that should come first, then the rights of the society should come second, and then third, the rights of the perpetrator. Obviously the perpetrator's got human rights, however, putting someone in prison does not breach their human rights, and you don't have to cry about the fact you're never going to release him. You don't need to feel guilty about the fact you're not going to release people like this. People like this, it's expected that they get locked away for the rest of their lives. Yet this guy's out and about and enjoying life. I'm going to assume, though, that he's not ill because he wasn't cleared of rape. There was no mention of diminished responsibility or however it works. I'm going to assume that this guy is of sound enough mind to face justice and that he knows what he did was wrong. Otherwise, I assume that he would be in hospital just now. Now, the only bit of positive news regarding this story is that members of the public complained to the Attorney General at the time, and the sentence is now being reviewed under the unduly lenient sentence scheme. So this absolute joke of a sentence is being reviewed as too soft, and that only happens if the Attorney General agrees with the public who have complained that in their opinion it looks too lenient. So that again suggests that this guy's actually of sound enough mind to face responsibility for his actions, because the Attorney General is going to have all the information about this guy to hand when he's deciding whether this sentence should be reviewed. He's going to be able to see this guy's medical history, etc., and he or she, I should say, has decided that this person should face the consequences of their actions, and it should be put to a court once again to decide whether their sentence was unduly lenient and needs to be increased. Now, based on that, which is going to be happening on Friday, the 11th of December, based on that, I hope this person will be imprisoned for the rest of his life. But I'm not going to hold my breath. The chances of him getting a whole life sentence is zero in the UK, let's be honest. It's a real shame because in the USA, this guy, they would throw away the key and that would be that. But surely an extremely lengthy sentence is required. It doesn't take a genius to figure that one out. The thing is though, even if they do give him a proper sentence this time round, it's not good enough. This guy's been out on the streets in a position to commit more harm against more innocent people. He could have fled the country, he could have gone into hiding, anything, and it could now be impossible to find him, to bring him into prison if that is what is decided at this hearing. So it's not good enough. The judge that gave this sentence has to explain themselves, and the media should be actually looking into this, which they're not. Now, I used to be quite an optimistic kind of guy. I'm obviously naive as anything, but I used to be optimistic that justice would normally be done in the UK. I thought if you left it to justice, once you went to court, justice would be done, the truth would come out, and you would be treated the way that you deserve to be treated. Now, I don't so much believe in that anymore. I've seen too many people mistreated by the courts. So my faith in justice being a natural outcome has been shaken over time, and stories like this where somebody's getting treated extremely leniently by the courts also shakes my faith in justice being done. But regardless, my fingers are crossed anyway in the hope that justice will be done on Friday when the sentence is reviewed. Again, I hope the guy goes to prison. If he goes to prison, he'll be straight down at the bottom of the pecking order where he belongs, and nature will take its course, and he will have to face up to what he's done. If he's so severely mentally ill to the point that he cannot function in society without harming children, then he also needs to be locked away, potentially in a secure hospital, until he's no longer a threat to others. And again, that is extremely unlikely that there will ever come a day when this person is not a threat to children. There's no way this guy is going to be rehabilitated and safe to walk the streets. That's, of course, my opinion, but as far as I'm aware, the recidivism rate for sex offenders is shockingly high. It's a real problem that society has to face. So apparently we'll know on Friday if he's actually going to face justice. Don't hold your breath that the media is going to be the one to tell you about it, because certainly not the mainstream media anyway, because that's another weird thing about this case. It might possibly be the first time you've actually heard about this. When I read about it, I actually saw it on Twitter. It was the first time I'd seen it. I was quite surprised because I would have thought that it would have been mainstream news, it would have been headline news. I don't really watch or follow the mainstream media at all these days. However, I would have expected it to have filtered through into my knowledge of what was going on in the country to hear that a sentence this low had been passed for a crime this severe. The only two outlets that actually covered it, I believe, was the Daily Mail and the Daily Mirror. They were the only two mainstream national news outlets that covered it. They reported the story about him being given 0 jail time for his crime, and I would have just, as I say, thought the whole mainstream press would have had this as front page news, but only these 2 sources covered it, and it wasn't front page news. Obviously local press covered it as well, press that was local to the guy where the crime happened. But this new development that the sentence is being investigated as unduly lenient, that just seems to have disappeared. The only people that covered that, or the only outlets that covered that, was the local press. None of the mainstream have covered that at all, not that I can find anyway. I can't find a single mainstream source that's covering the fact that this sentence is being looked at as unduly lenient, even though they covered the lenient sentence in the first place. So I don't know why that would be. I just find it strange that they wouldn't cover the follow-up story, that the guy's sentence has been investigated. Maybe we will hear from the mainstream if the guy gets sent down, but it just seems weird how much seems to be missing from this story. You've got the judge's sentencing remarks missing or nowhere to be found. The background of the perpetrator nowhere to be found, at least not officially. The secret barrister can't find anything. Only a couple of sources in the mainstream media actually ran with the initial story, and none of them appear to be running with the follow-up. It's down to local press only. So let's hope that we do hear about the outcome on Friday, and let's hope that this is actually looked into properly. If the outcome is that this guy's sentence is increased, fine, that's good, that's what we want. If it isn't increased, we need to know what's going on. We need some actual journalists to probe this case heavily and ask for answers from the judge. It's shocking that journalists haven't already been on this properly. The mainstream press that was covering it, along with the local press that was covering it, they all basically said the same thing. So it was the same, they were using the same source for their information, for their stories. Anyway folks, if you followed me this far, thank you very much. It's a sad and depressing story to bring you down midweek, so I'm happy to be a service for that. Hopefully we'll hear a bit better news regarding it at the end of the week. I will try and bring you a bit less evil and sadness next time, but I just needed to make a video about this. It's just an abortion of justice, there's no other word for it. So I can only hope that justice is done the second time around, and let's hope that it actually gets some coverage, because this guy needs to be on the front pages. Apart from that, I hope you're all doing very well. If you're not subbed already, then you may as well just hit the subscribe button now and get it over and done with. Thank you very much for following along folks. Remember to put your comments down below as well in the comments section. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers folks.